Since time immemorial, those gifted with intelligence and depth have been seen as both visionaries and outsiders. History is filled with brilliant minds who, by seeing beyond the veil of immediate reality, found themselves isolated, misunderstood, or even persecuted. But why can intelligence be a curse? And more importantly, what does that say about the society we have built? Carl Jung, in his exploration of the human psyche, revealed something essential. A differentiated consciousness distances an individual from the collective. This happens because deep thought demands confrontation, while society often prefers the comfort of inertia. The average person feels safe within norms, predictable patterns, and ready-made ideas. Meanwhile, the intelligent individual, by nature, disrupts this stability, questioning dogmas, challenging conventions, and seeing what others refuse to acknowledge. Intelligence, when paired with introspection, becomes a burden. Jung believed that the process of individuation, the path to psychic wholeness, was arduous and lonely. Society, rather than encouraging this journey, actively marginalizes those who stand out. Collective thought, often dominated by conformity and mediocrity, perceives intelligence as a threat. This leads to a cruel paradox. The intelligent person perceives more, feels more, understands more, but also suffers more. They find themselves trapped between their need for authenticity and the pressure to fit in. Seeing the superficiality of interactions, the fragility of collective beliefs, and the mechanical nature of modern life, they experience a profound sense of alienation. This isolation is not just social, but existential. But where does this mediocrity that seems to permeate society come from? Nietzsche, in his sharp critique of mass culture, described the last man, a passive being, content with trivial pleasures, who avoids any form of pain or questioning. This last man symbolizes mediocre society, fearing depth, fleeing discomfort, and ridiculing those who dare to think independently. The culture of mediocrity is not an accident, but a defense mechanism against the anguish of elevated consciousness. Jung saw this phenomenon in a similar way. He understood that the collective psyche tends to suppress whatever threatens its stability. This means that true intelligence, the kind that transcends utilitarianism and touches the soul, is often rejected. The modern world reinforces this tendency by valuing pragmatism over reflection, productivity over creativity, and shallow entertainment over self-awareness. Society not only marginalizes intelligence, but corrupts it. It turns intelligence into a tool of convenience, encouraging it only when it serves the system's interests. Thus, those who could be great thinkers are pushed toward conformity, forced to dilute their depth in order to fit in. Faced with this, the great question arises, is there a way out of this curse? Or is the fate of the intelligent individual always one of isolation and suffering? If deep intelligence leads to isolation and suffering, what then is the solution? Should the intelligent individual conform to mediocrity to find belonging? Or should they persist in their authenticity, even if it condemns them to solitude? Carl Jung offers an answer: individuation. For him, the purpose of life is not to fit into society, but to become who we truly are. However, this process requires courage, as it means abandoning the illusion of easy belonging and embracing the solitary journey of self-awareness. Modern society, by promoting superficiality and conformity, prevents many from even beginning this path. The fear of ostracism makes even the most intelligent repress their depth, adopting masks to survive socially. But the true tragedy occurs when a person forgets they are wearing a mask and starts believing they are what society expects them to be. Jung argued that ignoring one's essence leads to devastating internal conflict. The unconscious will not remain silent forever. Sooner or later, the psyche demands its price: anxiety, depression, a deep sense of emptiness. How many brilliant minds, unable to find a space for their depth, have succumbed to despair? However, the solution is not to surrender to resentment or absolute isolation. The mistake many intelligent individuals make is assuming a stance of superiority, despising society as a whole, and emotionally exiling themselves. This path, besides being lonely, often leads to cynicism and bitterness. Jung teaches that the true wise person does not flee from the world. They learn to navigate it without losing themselves. This means accepting that mediocrity will always exist, but refusing to let it dictate one's values. The intelligent individual does not need to become a hermit or deny society. Instead, they must find ways to integrate their depth into reality without being consumed by it. Nietzsche, in speaking of the Übermensch, suggested something similar. The superior individual should not hate the masses, but transcend their limitations. They do not seek external validation because they find meaning within themselves. This brings us to the essential point. Intelligence without purpose is merely a burden, but intelligence aligned with self-knowledge becomes a gift. So how can an intelligent individual find meaning in a society that seems not to value them? Jung believed the answer lay in connecting with something greater: art, philosophy, spirituality, the pursuit of true wisdom. When intelligence is directed toward these paths, it becomes more than a source of anguish. It transforms into a force of creation and enlightenment. Intelligence is a curse only when we don't know what to do with it. When channeled toward individuation, it becomes a bridge to true freedom. But how does one deal with the constant feeling of displacement? How can the pain of intelligence be transformed into strength? The feeling of displacement is a constant for those who see beyond the surface. The modern world, with its frantic pace and incessant stimuli, turns introspection into a burden. Sharper minds feel crushed by the superficiality of discourse, the banality of relationships, and the mechanical nature of social interactions. But is this pain truly inevitable? Carl Jung teaches us that the discomfort intelligent individuals feel in the face of mediocrity should not be repressed but understood. This unease is not a flaw to be corrected, but a symptom of a soul longing for something greater. The real question, then, is not how to avoid this suffering, but how to use it as a driving force for self-development. One way out is the search for meaning. Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, believed that human beings could endure any suffering as long as they found a purpose for it. The intelligent person who feels out of place must transform their pain into creation, their anguish into knowledge, their solitude into contemplation. This is the path of individuation, the process of becoming who one truly is, regardless of external pressures. But this does not mean withdrawing from the world. A common mistake among highly conscious individuals is isolating themselves in an intellectual exile, dismissing society as if it has nothing to offer. However, Jung reminds us that true growth does not come from escape, but from integration. The wise person is not the one who hides from life, but the one who learns to navigate it without losing themselves. This requires a delicate balance, knowing when to engage and when to retreat, when to share thoughts and when to withhold them, when to challenge mediocrity and when to accept it as part of the human condition. Intelligence becomes a burden only when carried without direction, but when used to create, transform, and understand, it becomes a gift. The great trap of intelligence is arrogance. Many fall into the illusion that their intellect makes them superior to others, developing a quiet contempt for the world around them. This only deepens their isolation and stunts their growth. The true wise person, on the other hand, understands that knowledge does not make them better than anyone. It simply makes them more responsible. With this in mind, the final question is, how can intelligence be used to truly live rather than merely survive in a world that does not value it? The answer lies in the courage to follow one's own path without seeking approval, in the relentless pursuit of meaning, and in the understanding that the solitude of intelligence does not have to be a curse. It can be an opportunity to find one's true voice. So, is the curse of intelligence inevitable, or can it be transformed into a gift? Intelligence only becomes a curse when the one who possesses it doesn't know what to do with it. If used solely as a tool for analysis, without connection to a greater purpose, it can lead to alienation and nihilism. However, when channeled into creation, transformation, and self-discovery, it becomes a bridge to true fulfillment. Carl Jung teaches us that the journey of the conscious individual involves reconciliation with their own shadow, that is, the hidden and repressed aspects of the psyche. Many intelligent people suffer because their sharp perception allows them to see the hypocrisy of the world, yet they forget to look within. They judge society's mediocrity but ignore their own contradictions and limitations. The true path to transcending the curse of intelligence does not lie in escape or contempt for the collective, but in integration. This means accepting that the world will always contain imperfection, that society will never be fully enlightened, and that mediocrity is not an isolated flaw of others, but an inherent condition of humanity. And within that acceptance, finding one's own space for fulfillment. The philosopher and psychologist William James described two types of people: those who live automatically, going with the flow, and those who awaken to a more conscious existence. Those who awaken may suffer more, but they also gain access to deeper experiences, a more authentic connection to reality, and a truer sense of freedom. This brings us to a crucial question. Should the intelligent individual resign themselves to solitude, or is there a way to find belonging without compromising authenticity? Jung suggests that the solution lies in building a community based on quality, not quantity. Instead of trying to fit into the larger group, one must seek out those few who share a similar vision and value deep thought. The digital age, despite promoting superficiality in many ways, also allows for connection between like-minded minds. It has never been easier to find books, ideas, discussions, and people who share the same search for meaning. The challenge, then, is not just to endure solitude, but to transform it into a period of growth until meaningful and enriching relationships can be cultivated. Ultimately, intelligence should not be a burden, but a tool. Those who feel that their perception separates them from the world must understand that their purpose is not to conform to mediocrity, but to illuminate new paths. As Jung stated, what we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. If intelligence is repressed, it becomes a weight. If accepted and directed, it becomes a source of creation and transcendence. Thus, the curse can be broken. The price, courage; the reward, freedom. The only question that remains is, are we willing to pay the price? If this video resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Have you ever felt that your intelligence distanced you from society? How do you deal with it? And before you go, check out the recommended videos on the final screen. They can take your journey of self-discovery and reflection even further. See you next time.